Hello, Beck's team. This week's agronomy update is going to pertain to irrigation. Here in central Nebraska, we have reached the time of the year for active irrigation on most of our cornfields. The corn crop behind me is around that V12, V13 growth stage. And with the weather this week, it's probably using anywhere from 15 to 20 hundredths of water per day. This particular area, the Kearney, Elm Creek, Nebraska area of the state, has been actually getting some pretty adequate rainfalls over the last month and a half. So there hasn't really been any active irrigation going on in this area. Now you go east of here, east of Grand Island, they've been actively irrigating for over a month now, trying to refill that soil profile in anticipation for the heavy crop water usage time of the year. Now, in this area, in this particular field, when I probed it in our first foot, we have about 80% soil moisture. Second foot is about 80% soil moisture. And then third foot is about 80% soil moisture. So what that's telling me is that crop is actively pulling water out of all 3 feet of the soil profile right now. When the crop starts pulling water out of the second and third foot, usually around mid-June, around V10, V11, that's when we want to start active irrigation. We want to keep that soil profile somewhat full between now and through the end of tasseling, through the end of the reproductive stage, and up to about, I'd say soft dough to hard dough stage is when you want to keep active irrigation. When I say active irrigation, I mean watering to meet the crop water usage. You can look at any crop water usage chart, ET charts. Several universities have ET gauges out there so you can know what your crop is using per week. And from now until dough stage, you want to be watering how much that crop is using. So this week, as I said, this crop is using anywhere from 1 to 1.4 inches per week. That means you want to be irrigating 1.4 inches per week or so. It's irrigation, doesn't have to be perfect. And is the crop using exactly that much? Give or take. We want to keep that soil moisture level from now until the end of now through dough stage. Why is that? We don't want it going down. We don't really want it going up much. We don't want it going down from here on out, because once we get through up to tasseling time, this crop here behind me could be using as much as 3,500 to 40 hundredths of water per day. That is more than any irrigation system in this area can be able to apply. Most irrigation systems with an 800 gallon per minute or higher well, and that pivot is watering 150 acres, that most it's going to be able to put on per day is 30 hundredths per day. And that's usually about the average irrigation system we have. So if you're only able to put on 30 hundredths per day, and that crop is using 35 to 40 hundredths per day, and say you have a breakdown in there or a shutdown or some type of event, that means your crop is going to be using more water than what you're irrigating. That means you're going to have something in reserve, something in that second and third foot of your soil profile for that crop to use during those times that you cannot irrigate enough. So here in the Kearney area, we have a good full soil profile, pretty full. We came out of the winter with a relatively full profile, and we've had adequate rainfall that we haven't really drawn out of that second and third foot yet. Now you get east of Grand Island, very little rainfall so far this year, almost practically none, it feels like. They've been actively irrigating for a month, and the second and third foot, a lot of those profiles in that area are relatively empty. What I recommend for those fields, the fields that the second and third foot are not full right now, is to irrigate as much as you can. It's a simple process, not easy to accomplish, but it's simple. You need to be irrigating right now more than what your crop is using. So if your crop is using 1.4 inches per week, you need to be trying to apply 2 inches per week, if that's possible, to do what you can to try to get that second and third foot filled up before you get to tassel time. This crop is about 10 to 14 days to tassel. So that means this farmer, if the second and third foot of this profile was not full, that means he'd have 2 weeks to try to add more to. So if you use the checkbook method of irrigation, he has a little bit of time to add more to his balance, his water balance. And you can do that right now, but it's going to take, you have to be actively irrigating. I mean, that means that irrigation system is going 24/7 for the next 14 days. And it can happen. This is the time of year that we can try to get ahead of it, to try to get ahead of that peak crop water usage that we're going to be seeing over the next 2-3 weeks for most of our corn crop. Soybeans, won't really touch on soybeans a whole lot right now because there shouldn't be a whole lot of active irrigation on soybeans. The only reason you should be irrigating soybeans right now is either to activate herbicide or to try to, if you're in extremely dry areas, to try to keep that crop growing enough to get canopied. But once you get a canopy, you want to stop irrigation. We want to really, that soybean plant, we want to be stressing it this time of year. Not necessarily stressing it, but we don't want it growing too tall. We want those nodes to be as close together as possible. And once we get to that R2, R3 stage, once we get some pods starting to develop on the about 2 or 3 nodes up that plant, that's when active irrigation should start on soybeans. That's when you should be irrigating to meet crop water usage on soybeans. We don't want that plant growing too tall and too spindly. If it does that, then that leads to lodging issues and disease issues later in the year. There's a lot of research out there showing that beans love a dry June, and that's what we want to try to give it. We don't want to over irrigate our soybeans during this time of the year. Attached to the video, I'll have an attachment of some different notes for irrigation scheduling. There's some crop water usage charts in there. There's how to calculate, there'll be a link for an ET gauge for the state of Nebraska. Use all of those resources, and as always, if you have any questions about irrigation, let me know or let any Beck's representative know. Last thing, you can't manage what you don't measure. I have here a soil probe. Let's take a soil core. There'll be resources on how to hand feel soil and be able to tell what soil moisture it is. This stuff right now, it's about 75 to 80% soil moisture. I'm able to make a ball, bounce it in my hand. It doesn't fall apart, but it does feel dry. There'll be resources in that handout or in that attachment to be able to help do that more. Otherwise, if you have a moisture sensor in the area or in your field, those are also great resources as well. Those may be kind of tricky to read or know how to interpret them sometimes. Again, reach out to your Beck's representative. We'd be happy to help with any of that. Thank you.